The wooden box clicked open, and Ethan Westbrook's hand froze midair. The 9-year-old's body went rigid as a voice he hadn't heard in 3 years filled the hospital room. His dead mother's voice, speaking directly to him through the small audio device. "Ethan, baby, if you're hearing this." The boy's eyes went wide, pupils dilating with shock. His billionaire father, Marcus, stood paralyzed across the room, not understanding what was happening. The waitress who opened that box, Claire Donovan, held her breath, watching years of silence shatter in real time. What Marcus didn't know: Claire was the therapist his wife trusted with their son's future, the same woman he'd spent 3 years destroying. What Claire didn't know: the recording she was playing would force a father and son to confront the truth that had been buried with Catherine Westbrook. In the next 60 seconds, a child who hadn't spoken since witnessing his mother's death would scream one word that changed everything. But first, let me show you how a waitress became the only person who could save a broken family. 6:45 a.m., and Claire Donovan's hands moved with precision most surgeons would envy. Table 4 needed 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, coffee black. Table 7 wanted the fisherman special with extra tartar sauce. Table 2, the regular with the pacemaker. Always ordered decaf, but she brought him half CAF because full decaf made him irritable by 9. Riverside Diner smelled like it always did. Burnt coffee mingling with fried cod. Salt air pushing through the gaps in the weathered window frames. October mornings in Portland. Maine carried that particular coastal chill that made the coffee steam rise thick and comforting. Claire's uniform, the same pale blue polyester she'd worn for 18 months, felt thin against the draft from the kitchen. She'd memorized 47 orders this morning without writing a single one down. Her manager, Tom, called it a party trick. Claire called it survival. Tips from accurate orders paid better than tips from forgotten modifications. As she cleared table 9, her hands moved unconsciously, fingers forming shapes in the air, residual muscle memory from another life. Sign language patterns she taught to children who'd forgotten how to speak, children whose trauma had stolen their voices, but not their need to communicate. She caught herself mid-sign and lowered her hands quickly. Stay invisible, she reminded herself. Invisible meant safe. The bank app on her phone showed $347.18. Rent was due in 6 days, $875. Her grandmother's hospice care bill arrived yesterday, $4,200 monthly, and Medicare covered exactly none of it because Nana needed specialized dementia care. Claire had picked up 3 double shifts this week. Her feet ached in that deep bone way that no amount of soaking could fix. During her break, she slipped into the staff room and opened her locker. Behind her spare apron sat a small wooden box, no bigger than a jewelry case. The brass clasp had tarnished, and if you looked closely at the corner, you could see the edge of a faded hospital ID badge, blue border, laminated, the photo barely visible. Claire's fingers hovered over it, then pulled back. Some doors needed to stay closed. "Claire, Four Top just sat in your section." Tom's voice carried from the dining room. She shut the locker, straightened her apron, and returned to the efficient, invisible rhythm that kept her alive. Pour coffee. Take orders. Smile. Repeat. This diner had been her sanctuary for 18 months. Anonymous, unremarkable, safe. She had no idea that sanctuary was about to shatter. The bell above the diner door chimed at 7:30, and the entire room shifted. Marcus Westbrook entered like he owned the building, which Claire realized from the way Tom straightened his spine he probably did. Charcoal suit that cost more than Claire made in 6 months. Italian leather shoes that had never seen a scuff. Salt and pepper hair styled with a kind of precision that required a personal barber. His phone buzzed against his palm every 15 seconds. Each vibration, another $1 million decision demanding his attention. Behind him walked a small boy with dark curls and enormous brown eyes that seemed to swallow the world whole. Mr. Westbrook, Tom practically sprinted across the diner. Your usual table, sir. Right this way. The corner booth, the one with the best view of the harbor, had a reserved placard Claire had never questioned until now. Other customers glanced up, recognition rippling through the breakfast crowd. Two fishermen at the counter nodded respectfully. A woman in business attire quickly straightened her posture. Claire approached with coffee pot in hand, professional smile fixed in place. He'll have orange juice, fresh squeezed, no pulp, Marcus said, not looking at his son. And bring him the Mickey Mouse pancakes. I'll take coffee, black, and the Atlantic scramble. The boy, Ethan, according to Tom's whispered briefing, said nothing. His fingers drummed against the laminate tabletop in patterns that weren't quite random. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause. His eyes tracked Claire's movements with an intensity that made her breath catch. On the table between father and son sat a sketchbook, pages covered in drawings. Sailboats rendered in careful detail, ocean waves and scattered throughout. Hand symbols that made Claire's heart hammer against her ribs. Marcus spoke into his phone, voice low and sharp. Tell the board I don't care about their timeline. Catherine's foundation money goes to neurological research, not experimental programs that don't work. His jaw tightened. I've paid enough specialists. None of them fixed him. He spoke about Ethan like the child wasn't sitting 18 inches away, absorbing every word. Claire set down the orange juice with carefully steady hands. Ethan's fingers never stopped their rhythmic patterns. The same 3-beat sequence, over and over, desperate and deliberate. From the counter, Dorothy Henderson, 76 years old, 30-year diner regular, former hospice nurse, caught Claire's eye and leaned close as she passed. That's Marcus Westbrook, Dorothy whispered, her weathered face soft with sadness. His boy hasn't spoken since the accident 3 years back. Shame about Catherine. She was a lovely woman. Claire turned back to the corner booth. Marcus was absorbed in his phone, but his free hand reached across the table to gently wipe a drop of orange juice from Ethan's chin. A gesture so tender it cracked through his armored demeanor like lightning through stone. The boy's eyes never left Claire's face, and his fingers kept tapping their silent, desperate message. Claire's third trip to the corner booth, coffee pot in hand, and Ethan's finger patterns finally clicked into focus. Not random, not nervous, fidgeting. Modified ASL, specifically the trauma-adaptive variation she'd pioneered at Boston Children's Hospital for children who'd lost their voices to psychological shock. The 3-beat sequence. Help. Me. Please. Her hands trembled, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the pot's rim. She set it down on the next table before she could spill it. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away. Exposure meant discovery. Discovery meant Marcus Westbrook investigating her background. Investigation meant finding the malpractice lawsuit, the destroyed license, the ruin that chased her across state lines. She'd rebuilt her invisibility carefully. Every brick of anonymity placed with deliberate precision. But Ethan's fingers kept moving. Help. Me. Please. Over and over. The desperate prayer of a child who'd been silent for 3 years. Claire knew that pattern. She'd taught that pattern to exactly 17 children in her career, each one traumatized by violence or loss, so profound their bodies had shut down speech as protection. Professional obligation warred with self-preservation in her chest, both pulling so hard she couldn't breathe. She was a waitress now. She had no license, no authority, no right to intervene. But she was also a therapist who'd sworn an oath, and that oath hadn't died just because her career had. Her hands moved before her brain could stop them. She signed back as she reached for his empty juice glass. I see you. Ethan's entire body went rigid. His brown eyes flooded with tears that spilled down his cheeks in silent rivers. His hand shot out and grabbed Claire's wrist with desperate strength, his small fingers digging into her skin like she was a life raft in drowning waters. What? Marcus looked up from his phone. finally noticing. Ethan, let go of her. I'm sorry, he does that sometimes. Random movements. Stop encouraging it. Claire's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. She could walk away, should walk away, protect herself, protect her grandmother's care, protect the fragile anonymity she'd built. Ethan's fingers tightened on her wrist, and she felt him sighing against her skin. You know, you understand. That's not random, Claire heard herself say. Her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. He's using adapted ASL for trauma patients. I recognize the pattern. Marcus's face shifted from irritation to shock to something harder. Are you some kind of expert? His tone made expert sound like an accusation. You're a waitress. There it was, the dismissal she'd expected, the class-based assumption that her uniform negated any possible expertise. She'd heard it before, would hear it again, but Ethan's hand trembled in hers, and his eyes held 3 years of silence, begging to be broken. Claire met Marcus Westbrook's cold stare and didn't look away. I've seen this before, she said quietly. Each word a bridge she couldn't uncross. He's trying to tell you something important, something he can't say out loud, but he can communicate. He is communicating. You're just not listening. Marcus's phone hit the table with a sharp crack. His fingers flew across the screen, searching, investigating, and Claire knew with sick certainty that she'd just lit the fuse on her own destruction. But Ethan's hand relaxed in hers, and he signed one more word. Thank you. Across the table, Marcus's eyes narrowed as search results loaded, and everything started to unravel. Tom caught Claire in the kitchen 15 minutes later, his face flushed and angry. What did you say to Marcus Westbrook? His voice pitched low, but furious. He just complained that you overstepped with his son. Do you have any idea who he is? He owns half the commercial real estate on this waterfront, Claire. I didn't, Claire's voice caught. His son was trying to communicate. You're a waitress, not a doctor, Tom snapped. Mr. Westbrook has had his son evaluated by every specialist from here to Johns Hopkins. You think you know better? Johns Hopkins. Claire's chest tightened. That's where she'd earned her master's degree in pediatric speech pathology. 8 years and a lifetime ago. I'm sorry, she whispered. Because what else could you say? I know better because I pioneered the technique his son is using, because I'm not actually a waitress, because his dead wife might have learned my methods before she died. Tom's expression softened slightly. Just stick to coffee and pancakes, okay? We can't afford to lose his business. Claire nodded and escaped to the staff bathroom, locking herself in a single stall. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. If Marcus Westbrook investigated her name, he'd find everything. The lawsuit, the destroyed license, the accusations. And then he'd make sure she lost this job too. And Nana's hospice care would disappear, and the invisibility she'd built would shatter completely. 8 years earlier, Dr. Claire Donovan, lead pediatric speech therapist, Boston Children's Hospital, corner office with a view of the Charles River, publications in 3 major journals, patients waiting 6 months for her consultation slots. Then Catherine Ashford Westbrook walked through her door, young, desperate, researching experimental treatments for selective mutism. Her 4-year-old son, Ethan, had witnessed something traumatic and stopped speaking entirely. Traditional therapies failed. Catherine found Claire's research on trauma-adaptive ASL and begged for help. They'd worked together for 4 months. Catherine learned the techniques obsessively, practiced them nightly, recorded video lessons for when she couldn't be present. Ethan was beginning to respond. Small signs, finger patterns, the building blocks of recovery. Then Catherine died in a boating accident, and her family, the prominent, powerful Ashford dynasty, needed someone to blame. They blamed Claire. The lawsuit claimed her experimental and unapproved techniques had worsened Catherine's existing anxiety condition. that the stress of the therapy contributed to her mental state the day of the accident. Medical experts they hired testified that Claire's methods were dangerous, unproven, potentially harmful. Claire fought for 18 months, burned through her savings on lawyers. Lost anyway. The Massachusetts Board of Medicine suspended her license pending investigation, and the hospital quietly terminated her contract to avoid scandal. The legal fees bankrupted her. Her grandmother's health declined without adequate care. Claire fled to Maine under her maiden name, found work at Riverside Diner, and learned the grace of invisibility. She never knew what happened to Ethan, never knew if Catherine's family continued the therapy or abandoned it, never knew that Marcus Westbrook, the grieving husband she'd never met, had signed the termination papers that destroyed her career, acting on his in-laws' advice. Claire's phone buzzed. A notification from the diner's staff group chat. Tom, Claire's section reassigned today. Marcus Westbrook requested different server. Her throat closed. It was starting. The investigation, the questions, the inevitable exposure. But behind her closed eyes, she saw Ethan's desperate fingers signing help. Me, please. She saw 3 years of silence that could have been prevented if anyone, had continued Catherine's work. Claire had lost everything once before, lost it trying to help a mother save her child. And now that child was sitting in her diner, still trapped in silence, still using the techniques his mother had learned in those final months, which meant Catherine hadn't abandoned the therapy. She'd practiced it, recorded it, left it somewhere for Ethan to find. And if Marcus Westbrook was going to destroy Claire anyway, she might as well earn it. Claire just risked everything by revealing her knowledge. Was she right to expose herself, or should she have stayed invisible? Drop your answer below. Subscribe, because what Marcus discovers next will make you question everything you assumed about this story. Claire's hands shook as she dialed the number she'd sworn never to call again. Dr. Sarah Chin. The voice answered, professional and cautious. Sarah, it's Claire. Claire Donovan. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then, my God, where have you been? They met at a coffee shop in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, far enough from Portland that Claire felt marginally safe. Sarah had been her research partner at Boston Children's, the only colleague who believed Claire's innocence when the Ashford family's lawyers came circling. Catherine Westbrook recorded everything, Sarah said, sliding a flash drive across the table. I found this in her medical files after she died. She'd been documenting her sessions with you, practicing the trauma-adaptive ASL techniques obsessively. There are 47 videos, Claire. Her learning your methods, recording practice sessions, creating what she called voice lessons for Ethan. Claire's throat closed. Why didn't this come out during the lawsuit? Because Patricia Ashford had it buried. Sarah's expression hardened. Catherine's sister told me, off the record, years later, after guilt ate at her. Patricia believed your methods were unproven nonsense that stressed Catherine out. When Catherine died, Patricia blamed you and made sure no evidence of Catherine's voluntary participation survived legal discovery. Claire's fingers trembled around the flash drive. There's more. Marcus Westbrook, Catherine's husband. He's in Portland with their son. The boy is still nonverbal, and he's using the techniques Catherine learned from me. Sarah's eyes widened. Marcus Westbrook, the man who signed your termination papers. The coffee in Claire's stomach turned to acid. What? He was the one who authorized the hospital to let you go, Sarah said quietly. The Ashfords convinced him you were dangerous. He never investigated himself. He was drowning in grief. He just signed whatever they put in front of him. Claire closed her eyes, understanding crystallizing with painful clarity. Marcus Westbrook hadn't known her. He destroyed her career based on his in-laws' lies, signing papers in a fog of loss, trusting the wrong people. There's something else on that drive, Sarah continued. Catherine rented a storage unit under her maiden name. I found the rental agreement in her hospital files. She listed me as emergency contact. The unit contains an audio device you built for her, Claire. Your prototype therapeutic voice recorder. She'd been using it to create lessons for Ethan. The wooden box, Catherine's final gift to her son. I need to get into that storage unit, Claire said, her voice steadying with purpose. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about finishing what Catherine started. As Claire drove back to Portland, she stopped at a red light in downtown Portsmouth and saw a familiar face through a restaurant window. James Harding, Marcus Westbrook's business partner. According to the Forbes profile she'd frantically Googled the night before. On impulse, Claire parked and walked inside. Mr. Harding? She approached his table, heart hammering. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm the waitress who spoke with Ethan Westbrook yesterday, and I need 5 minutes of your time. James studied her with sharp, assessing eyes. Marcus told me about you, said you overstepped. Marcus is wrong. Claire met his gaze steadily. And I think you know it. I saw you at the diner last month. You tipped me 40% and asked if I was okay when your colleague snapped his fingers at me like I was a dog. Something shifted in James's expression. Recognition that she'd noticed his quiet defiance of wealth's casual cruelty. What do you want? He asked. I want to help Ethan. But Marcus won't listen to someone he thinks is just a waitress, Claire said. His wife left something for their son, evidence that could bring him back. But I need someone Marcus trusts to help me get it to him. James leaned back, considering. Tell me everything. Marcus Westbrook's private investigator delivered the report at midnight. Subject: Claire Elizabeth Donovan, age 34. Former credentials: licensed pediatric speech-language pathologist, Massachusetts Board of Medicine. License suspended 2017. Reason: professional misconduct following malpractice lawsuit brought by Ashford family. Marcus's blood ran cold as he read. Not just any malpractice case. His family. Catherine's family. The therapist Patricia had warned him about. The one whose experimental techniques had allegedly contributed to Catherine's deteriorating mental state before the accident. And now that same discredited therapist was interacting with his son. He dialed Patricia Ashford immediately. Marcus, darling, do you know what time it is? His mother-in-law's voice carried her perpetual note of condescension. Tell me about Claire Donovan. Silence. Then Patricia's tone sharpened. Where did you hear that name? She's in Portland. She approached Ethan. Tell me the truth about her. Patricia's version came out smooth and practiced. Claire Donovan had been an ambitious therapist who pushed experimental, unapproved treatments on vulnerable patients. Catherine, desperate to help Ethan, had fallen under her influence. The stress of the intense therapy sessions had worsened Catherine's anxiety, contributed to her fragile state the day of the boating accident. The medical board agreed the techniques were dangerous. Case closed. She's clearly stalking you, Marcus. Probably wants money. I'll have our attorneys. Marcus hung up. Patricia's story fit the facts, but something about it felt wrong. Catherine had never mentioned stress about therapy. She'd mentioned hope. He opened his phone's voice memo app and found the file he'd saved 3 years ago. The last message Catherine left before she died. Marcus, I know you think I'm chasing false hope again, but I'm not. This is different. Dr. Donovan's research, it's exactly what Ethan needs. I've been practicing the techniques for months, and I can see him responding. Small things, but real. I'm recording everything, so if anything happens to me, Ethan will still have the lessons. I finally found hope for our boy Marcus. Real hope. I'll tell you everything tonight. I love you. That night never came. Catherine died 4 hours later when the storm hit. Marcus had listened to this message 10,000 times, never understanding what recording everything meant. Never understanding because Patricia told him to focus on grief, not false hopes from a disgraced therapist. His hand trembled as he replayed Catherine's voice. Dr. Donovan's research, It's exactly what Ethan needs. Not stress, not worsening anxiety. Hope, real hope. Marcus looked at his son, sleeping in the next room, still trapped in 3 years of silence. Looked at the investigator's report listing Claire Donovan as discredited, dangerous, probably predatory. Then he thought about Ethan's face in the diner when Claire signed to him. The first genuine emotion his son had shown since Catherine's funeral. What if Patricia had lied? What if he'd spent 3 years trusting the wrong people? What if the woman who could save his son was the same woman he'd helped destroy? Marcus walked into Riverside Diner at 6 p.m. on Friday, dinner rush in full chaos, with his attorney Richard Brennan beside him. Every conversation died as the two men in $5,000 suits cut through the dining room like sharks through shallow water. Claire was carrying a tray of lobster rolls to table 12 when she saw them, her hand steadied through pure force of will. Ms. Donovan, Richard's voice carried across the restaurant, designed to be heard. I'm Richard Brennan, legal counsel for Marcus Westbrook. We need to discuss your harassment of his minor son. The diner went dead silent. 40 customers and 5 staff members turned to watch. Tom stood behind the register, face pale. Claire set down the tray with careful precision. I haven't harassed anyone. You engaged in unauthorized therapeutic interaction with a vulnerable child, Richard continued, pulling papers from his briefcase. Despite having no active medical license and a history of professional misconduct. That's enough. Claire's voice cut through his performance. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat, but she didn't look away. Mr. Westbrook, your wife Catherine came to me voluntarily. She sought out my research because traditional therapies failed Ethan. I have hospital intake forms with her signature, consent documents, payment records, all proving she wanted my help. Marcus's jaw tightened. My late wife was vulnerable. Your late wife was brilliant, Claire interrupted, and something raw flashed in Marcus's eyes. She spent 4 months learning trauma-adaptive ASL techniques. She practiced obsessively because she loved your son more than anything in this world. And why did her family sue you? Marcus demanded. Because she defied them. A new voice entered the conversation. Dorothy Henderson stood from her corner table, her 76-year-old frame suddenly commanding. I was Catherine's hospice nurse after the accident, Marcus. I held her hand when she died, and I watched her practice hand signs for hours before that final trip. Saw her recording voice memos for Ethan on a little wooden device. Marcus turned to Dorothy, shock cracking through his armor. What? Your wife spent her final months learning to help Ethan, Dorothy continued, moving to stand beside Claire. The Ashfords didn't want you to know because they thought the therapy was beneath their daughter. They wanted specialists, fancy clinics, traditional medicine. They never understood that Catherine found exactly what your boy needed. Claire saw her moment and took it. Catherine left something for Ethan. Recordings, voice lessons using the techniques she learned from me. That's what she meant in her final message to you. I'm recording everything. Marcus's face went white. How do you know about that message? Because I understand what your wife was trying to do, Claire said quietly. She was creating a bridge for Ethan, a way back to his voice, using her voice as the guide. The Ashfords buried that evidence because it proved she sought experimental treatment voluntarily. It destroyed their lawsuit narrative. Richard stepped forward, papers rustling. Mr. Westbrook, don't listen to. Where are these recordings? Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Somewhere safe, Claire met his eyes. Somewhere Catherine hid them from people who would destroy her final gift to Ethan. The cold autumn air pushed through the diner's front door as another customer entered, and Claire tasted the bitter metallic flavor of injustice on her tongue. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Every instinct screamed to back down, apologize, disappear again. But Ethan's silent plea echoed in her memory. Help me, please. I'm filing for a restraining order, Marcus said, but his voice trembled. You stay away from my son. Richard produced the papers, and Marcus's hand shook as he signed them. The same hand that had signed Claire's termination papers 8 years ago, destroying her career on faith in the wrong people. Claire watched the pen move across paper and felt the familiar sting of defeat. Then she said, Catherine left something for Ethan. When you're ready to put your son before your pride, you know where to find me. She walked past them both, past Tom's horrified expression, past the silent customers, and out into the cold October evening. Behind her, she heard Marcus say, What have I done? But she didn't turn around. Some revelations had to come in their own time. Marcus is 3 steps ahead. Or is he? Do you think Claire will win through evidence, moral appeal, or something unexpected? Drop your prediction. Subscribe because the next 15 minutes contain 3 revelations that reframe everything. Tom fired Claire at midnight via text message. Can't have legal drama. Last paycheck mailed tomorrow. Sorry. Claire sat in her studio apartment, $127 left in her checking account, and stared at the eviction notice that had appeared on her door. 3 days to vacate for unpaid rent. Her phone buzzed. Meadowbrook Hospice calling. Ms. Donovan, regarding your grandmother's account. We've been patient, but without payment by Monday. We'll need to transfer Eleanor to county facility. I understand, Claire whispered and hung up. County facility meant warehouse care, 20 patients per nurse, no memory support, no dignity. Nana would deteriorate within weeks. Claire could leave Portland tonight, disappear to another city, another minimum wage job, another version of invisible survival. Marcus Westbrook's restraining order made staying dangerous. Staying meant legal battles she couldn't afford, exposure she couldn't survive. The smart choice was running. The safe choice was running. But on her kitchen table sat the flash drive Sarah had given her, and Claire knew running meant abandoning Ethan to silence forever. She called the one person who could verify Catherine's true final days, Dr. Michael Torres, the medical examiner who'd performed Catherine's autopsy. Dr. Torres, this is Claire Donovan. You documented Catherine Westbrook's belongings after the boating accident. There was research in her effects, therapy materials. I need you to testify about what you found. The Ashford family had me seal those records, Torres said carefully. A child is suffering because of their lies. Claire's voice steadied. You took an oath. So did I. We both know what the right thing is. Silence. Then, I documented everything. Catherine had a voice recording device in a waterproof case, still functioning when we recovered her body. Instructions for her son. Therapy protocols. She died trying to save him. Claire closed her eyes, grief and vindication warring in her chest. 8 years ago, Patricia Ashford watched her daughter pursue unproven experimental treatment and saw family reputation crumbling. The Ashfords built their legacy on traditional excellence. Harvard medicine, Yale law, old Boston money that didn't trust innovation from young therapists with radical ideas. When Catherine died, Patricia needed someone to blame. Not the storm, not fate. Someone whose destruction would restore order. She found Claire Donovan's research on trauma-adaptive ASL, techniques the medical establishment hadn't yet validated. She hired lawyers who build a narrative. Ambitious therapist exploits desperate mother. Experimental treatment causes stress. Stress contributes to death. Marcus, drowning in grief and guilt over arguments he'd had with Catherine about chasing false hope, believed his mother-in-law. He signed papers without reading them, destroyed a career without meeting the woman, trusted the people who told him what he wanted to hear, that Catherine's death wasn't random, that someone could be held accountable. Patricia buried Catherine's recordings because they proved the opposite. Catherine had found hope, pursued it joyfully, died by accident, not suicide or stress. The audio device Claire built, the wooden box Catherine treasured, contained 12 voice lessons teaching Ethan that silence was okay, that speaking was safe, that his mother's love transcended death. Back to the present. Claire drove to the storage unit at dawn, Sarah's rental key in hand. Inside Unit 247, she found boxes of Catherine's therapy materials and, wrapped in waterproof canvas, the wooden box she'd built 3 years ago. She opened it. Catherine's voice whispered from the small speaker. "Ethan, baby, if you're hearing this..." Claire called James Harding. "Marcus is making a donation speech at Portland Memorial Hospital on Monday." James said, "$5 million for children's speech therapy." The irony is nauseating. "Get me into that auditorium," Claire said, "and bring someone to film everything." "You're going to ambush him publicly?" "I'm going to give Ethan his mother's voice back," Claire corrected, "whether Marcus is ready or not." Portland Memorial Hospital's Kingsley Auditorium held 200 people, medical staff, donors, press, board members. Marcus Westbrook stood at the podium in a Navy suit, speaking about advancing pediatric care in Catherine's memory. Claire walked down the center aisle at exactly 3:17 p.m. 200 heads turned. A ripple of recognition spread through the crowd. Some had seen the viral video of the diner confrontation that a customer had posted online. "Mr. Westbrook," Claire's voice carried through the auditorium's acoustics, "before you donate $5 million to pediatric speech therapy, I think you should know who your late wife trusted to help your son." Security moved toward her, but James Harding stood from the front row. "Let her speak. This is important." Marcus's face drained of color. "You're violating." "I'm Dr. Claire Donovan," she interrupted, reaching the stage. "Licensed pediatric speech therapist, until your mother-in-law destroyed my career. The therapist your late wife trusted with your son's future. The woman you destroyed without ever meeting." Gasps rippled through the audience. Marcus's hands gripped the podium, knuckles white. "You're discredited," he said, but his voice wavered. "The medical board..." "James, a video," Claire said. The auditorium's main screen flickered to life. Catherine Westbrook's face appeared, younger, alive, sitting in what looked like a home office. Date: April 14th, 2022. "This is Catherine Westbrook, documenting my voluntary participation in Dr. Claire Donovan's trauma-adaptive ASL research. My family believes I'm wasting my time. They've threatened to cut off my trust fund if I continue. But they don't understand. Claire's techniques are working. Ethan is responding. For the first time in a year, I see hope." Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. The auditorium went utterly silent. Catherine's video continued. "I'm recording these sessions secretly because if anything happens to me, Ethan needs to know. He needs to hear his mother's voice teaching him it's safe to speak again. Dr. Donovan built a special device for him, an audio therapy tool that uses my voice as the guide. I'm creating 12 lessons. If you're watching this, Marcus, please find the wooden box I hid in storage unit 247. Give it to Ethan. Give him his voice back." The screen went dark. Marcus's face had crumbled, tears streaming openly. "No, no," Patricia said. "Patricia lied," Claire said softly. She pulled the wooden box from her bag and held it up. This is what Catherine meant in her final voicemail. She'd been recording lessons for Ethan using techniques I taught her. Your in-laws buried this evidence because it proved she sought experimental treatment voluntarily. It destroyed their lawsuit. She pressed play. Catherine's voice filled the auditorium, warm and alive and achingly gentle. "Ethan, baby, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. But your voice isn't. You didn't cause the accident. The storm did. You are not broken. You are not responsible. You are loved, and it's time to speak again." Marcus collapsed into the chair behind him, his entire body shaking. The sounds he made were raw, animal grief. 3 years of loss and guilt and realization crashing down simultaneously. "You destroyed my career because your in-laws convinced you I hurt Catherine," Claire said. Her voice steadied despite tears, tracking down her own face. You signed papers you never read, trusted people who lied to you, and your son has suffered in silence for 3 years because of it. I didn't know, Marcus gasped. God, I didn't know. An apology doesn't erase consequences. Claire cut him off. Ethan deserves to hear his mother's voice. What happens next is his choice, not yours. Not mine. His. She set the wooden box on the podium and turned to leave. Wait, Marcus's voice broke. Please. Show him. Show Ethan his mother's gift. I'm begging you. Claire stopped at the auditorium doors, looked back at the man who destroyed her, now destroyed himself by truth. Tomorrow, she said, bring him to your home. I'll be there. Behind her, Catherine's recorded voice continued its gentle lesson, filling the hospital with a dead woman's love and a living child's hope. James had arranged everything. Child Protective Services present as neutral witnesses, Dr. Torres as medical supervisor, Dorothy for emotional support. Marcus stood in his own living room like a stranger in a foreign country, devastated and desperate. Ethan sat on the couch, small and silent, until Claire entered carrying the wooden box. The boy's entire body went rigid. His hands flew up, signing frantically. That's hers. That's Mom's. How do you have Mom's box? Your mother made this for you, Claire said gently, kneeling before him. She wanted you to know it's safe to speak again. She wanted you to hear her voice teaching you. She opened the box. Press play. Ethan, baby, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. But your voice isn't. You didn't cause the accident. The storm did. You couldn't have saved me by screaming. You couldn't have saved me at all. But you can save yourself. You can speak. And I'm going to teach you how. Ethan's face transformed. Shock, recognition, grief, and desperate love all cascading across his features. Tears poured down his cheeks as his mother's voice continued, teaching him the techniques Claire had pioneered, showing him the path back to speech. Marcus moved toward his son, but James held him back. Wait, he whispered. This moment is Ethan's. Catherine's voice said, when you're ready, say the first word that comes to your heart, the word that matters most. Say it loud. Say it proud. Say it free. Ethan's mouth opened. 3 years of silence broke in a single piercing scream. Dad. He launched himself at Marcus, both of them collapsing to the floor, sobbing, holding each other as 3 years of grief and silence shattered around them. Dorothy wept. The CPS worker's professional composure cracked. Dr. Torres documented everything with tears on his face. James recorded it all, and Claire stood silently, watching the child she'd saved and the man who destroyed her find each other again through a dead woman's love. 3 weeks later, Claire's therapy license arrived via certified mail on a Tuesday, reinstated, with state apology for procedural irregularities in the original suspension. Marcus had funded 3 lawyers and paid for the independent review himself. Her new office overlooked Portland Harbor, Marcus's building, rent-free for 10 years, equipped with state-of-the-art therapeutic technology. Her grandmother's room at Meadowbrook Hospice was now private premium care, all expenses covered through the Catherine Westbrook Memorial Fund. Claire still flinched when wealthy clients entered, still felt the phantom weight of her waitress uniform, the muscle memory of invisibility. But now she didn't look away. Marcus had transformed in visible ways, sold 40% of Westbrook Industries to fund the Catherine Westbrook Foundation for Alternative Pediatric Therapies, attended therapy twice weekly for grief processing and what his counselor called privileged blindness, testified in federal court against Patricia Ashford, whose evidence falsification resulted in criminal charges. Ethan spoke in full sentences now, halting, careful but real. He still signed when overwhelmed, and Claire saw him twice weekly for continued therapy. Progress, not perfection. Dr. Claire? Ethan stood in her office doorway on a Thursday afternoon, Marcus behind him. Can I show you what I'm learning in school? Of course, Claire smiled. As the boy chattered about math class, Marcus caught her eye. Thank you formed on his lips. The 10,000th time he'd said it. Never enough to erase what he'd done, but slowly building something new where destruction had been. Claire's journey from invisible to unstoppable took 8 years. But I've documented 47 more stories like hers. Subscribe to see them. Drop below. What hidden skill do you have that would shock people? Your story might be next. 6 months later, Catherine Westbrook's Memorial Garden dedication drew 200 people. Ethan walked to the microphone, 9 years old but standing tall, and delivered a speech using every technique his mother had learned from Claire. My mom trusted Dr. Claire when nobody else would. His voice carried clear and strong. She knew that being different doesn't mean being broken, that healing takes courage, that love is louder than silence. In Claire's new office downtown, the wooden box sat on her bookshelf beside Catherine's photo. No longer hidden in a locker, no longer secret, but displayed proudly. A reminder that one woman's hidden expertise, combined with another woman's desperate love, had saved a child the system abandoned. And beside it, 46 more case files waited. 46 more invisible people whose stories deserved to be heard.